Welcome to the WWH show. This is a show that asks a series of why, what, and how questions on topics that have national, regional, and global significance and implications. Today we have that kind of topic. It's about migration. It's about Ethiopians who are in prison in Malawi. In this studio, we have the privilege to talk to Mr. Luca Dall'Oglio. He is Chief of Mission of the International Organization for Migration, IOM, Washington office. He is also board member of U.S. Association for International Migration. Prior to this assignment, he was a permanent observer for IOM to the United Nations in New York. A sociologist by training, Mr. Dall'Oglio has dedicated his career to issues related to population stabilization, post-crisis transition and recovery, with extensive field assignments in the Horn of Africa, Mozambique, Haiti, Guatemala, and Kosovo. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. I know you are a very busy person, but you came here to talk about a very important issue, which is Ethiopians, migrants who are in Malawi prison right now. We are conducting this interview after you received a donation from the Global Alliance for Human Rights of Ethiopians, GARI. They donated $10,000 US. Would you please tell us about your perception or view about the support you got from Ethiopians from the diaspora?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your program. It's very exciting, and so both on behalf of the International Organization for Migration that I represent here in Washington, and on behalf of our partner organization, the non-profit U.S. Association for International Migration, I wanted to acknowledge the very generous contribution of the Ethiopian diaspora towards their fellow nationals that are in a very difficult and vulnerable situations in Malawi. Let me add that you have been rather an exemplary community here in the U.S. This is not the first time that the Ethiopian diaspora comes into action, comes to the rescue. You had Ethiopian migrants in very difficult circumstances that were expelled from the Arabian Peninsula. You have Ethiopians suffering in a situation of warfare in Yemen, and therefore you've been amazingly generous towards your fellow countrymen in difficult circumstances. So on the one hand, I am extremely pleased and to have this support from the Ethiopians in the US, and I'm not completely surprised because we've been doing this in the past consistently and with a lot of commitment. And I visited some of your chapters and associations in various parts of the US, and I am very, very moved, if you like, by your effort, compassion, and solidarity.
That's great to hear, because you said before also the association, which is Global Alliance for Human Rights of Ethiopians, they also donated I think last year or something like that to IOM. So this is really encouraging to see our community supporting their fellow countrymen and women. My first question is, because we're going to talk about migration, why do you think, do you have any data, do you have any information about why people migrate from their home country to other places, even dangerous places like Libya, Malawi, or other parts of the world like Yemen?
You see, international migration, I think it's a feature of our century. Inequalities, disparities, advantages versus disadvantages. People make their own decisions. We are living in a world which is much more populated, but it's much more interconnected. And if I have an education, if I have opportunities, I would seek these opportunities for myself, my family members, whether they will come with me or they will be, left back at home, through remittances. People want to give a chance for themselves and others. It's a natural tendency, and this country where we are now is made of migrants, and it's made of many successful migrants. And what is most interesting is that the new refugees, the new migrants that arrive in the US, very often in a few years are able to catch up, and often coming in a very, very low income situations, and in a few years are able to show their capacity. So given the opportunity, men and women want to be productive members of society. They don't want to live in underemployment, in situation of poor governance, in situations where opportunities for personal growth and community growth are lacking, or worse, where there is open conflict and sense of hopelessness. In those circumstances, I think very natural that those who are young and perhaps more open to dare and to seek new opportunities will pursue those opportunities. So migration is a natural part of the human being, where the world is made of migrants, otherwise it would not have been populated when it was populated from the center of Africa or around. And that's why we have maybe 260 million migrants around the world. Many of these are people that have left on their own volition because of opportunities. Many are also those who have left under duress, forced to migrate. We call them refugees because many of them have a well-founded fear of persecutions.
These are very strong reasons, and it's understandable that people migrate when their life is under threat, when there is conflict, when there is no good governance, and also to seek opportunities. As you say, the United States, which is built by the migrant communities, the first migrants who came here because of persecution, religious persecution from Europe. And many people from Europe and other parts of the world came here for freedom or more opportunities in terms of innovation, professional growth, as you said. And also many of Ethiopians also, they have, including myself, we are migrants here in the United States because of political reasons. Many Ethiopians, because of their ethnic background, because of their political views and so on, if they remain in Ethiopia, they may be jailed or even killed. That's why they migrate and they take risks. The difficult thing about Ethiopian migrants is that they are going to even countries like Libya after ISIS killed 30 Ethiopians, slaughters 30 Ethiopians. Still they are bold, they are courageous, they are risk takers enough to go to Libya, go to Yemen, knowing that it's a conflict zone. That saddens me and Ethiopians in the diaspora, that when you come to the United States or other European countries, yes, you are an immigrant, but you have so many privileges that you may not even get from your own native country. I get more freedom and liberty in the United States, which is my second home, than back home in Ethiopia. So it's sad, it's going to continue, the migration issue going to continue to affect humanity. But the good thing is we have organizations like yourself, IOM, supporting and helping people. Once they migrate, you step in, you do whatever you could to support them. The question now, I want to specifically ask you if you have some information about Ethiopians migrants in Malawi's prison. Do you have any information about the number of migrants who are in prison, and what kind of situations are we talking about?
Yeah, the situation in Malawi is extremely worrying, and I think we need to work at different levels. As you know, there is a constant outflow of Ethiopians, not only to the north, but also to the strong economy of Southern Africa, in particular South Africa and neighboring countries. Malawi is a country of transit. Migration policy in Malawi needs to evolve, because at the moment migrants caught in transit are basically held in detention. And this is not only the case of Malawian Ethiopians, but also other nationalities. But the conditions under which they are held and are something that leaves much to be desired from all points of view, human rights point of view, but also humanitarian point of view. They basically share jails with the criminals. This is not an administrative detention, it should be, but unfortunately facilities are underdeveloped, so they are in overcrowded prisons. And in these prisons, living conditions are extremely dire, below acceptable standards. Now, the NGO Médecins Sans Frontières has been making some investigations in the conditions of migrants in detention in Malawi. And the results are very worrying. That's why I think there is a need for urgent international intervention. And that's why IOM is committed to having the resources to move as many Ethiopian migrants as possible back to Ethiopia under a voluntary repatriation scheme. Why this is urgent? Because, as I said, MSF has carried out an investigation in the prisons in Malawi. They are overcrowded, some of them up to 3 times their capacity. There is very little water, very little sanitation, and very little food, which in those conditions generates malnourishment and weak immunity system, exposure to disease, skin disease, pneumonia, malaria, even tuberculosis. So it is a situation that cannot be postponed. People need to be have served their sentences, are there because there is not a mechanism for them to return home and to leave the country. So that's where IOM can play a role. And in fact, we are doing that. In September, we had some 100 Ethiopians repatriated under IOM voluntary repatriation scheme back to their homes.
From where?
From Malawi. From Lilongwe, from the capital city. They were given medical assistance. Many were in need of medical assistance. They were given transportation. We had an agreement with Ethiopian Airlines to reduce the airfare for humanitarian reasons. And then once back in Ethiopia, they were given help to reach their final destination. I know it is not a very generous package, but at least keeps them away from harm's way.
By the way, what was the role of the Ethiopian government to repatriate 100 Ethiopians from Malawi? Do you know what kind of participation the government had?
Well, the Ethiopian government has a weak, as you know, consular network, so it's not present in Malawi. They had to fly in diplomatic personnel from the embassy in Nairobi, and this diplomatic personnel toured, if you like, various facilities, various prisons to help identify Ethiopians in those prisons and at least certify that they were national Ethiopians, giving them proper travel documents for those who did not have it, so that we could come up with a list of people in need which is somewhat credible and certified by the national authorities. At the moment we have registered almost 400 Ethiopians in prisons in Malawi, and there is absolutely no reasons why they remain in prison. They have been apprehended because of, as I said, an administrative misdemeanor, which is illegal entry into the country, and some of them have been fined, but they didn't have the resources to pay the fine, so ended up in prison. Others have been sentenced to a jail term, which has expired, but they cannot leave because there is no system for them to leave the country. So that is the situation. It's extremely, as I said, urgent to find modalities to help them return home. Because of the emergency health situations that I described, and because there is absolutely no reason why they further remain in jail. So
the question is fund to take them from Malawi to Ethiopia, to repatriate them. There is no enough fund, or do you still need to get some kind of identification for each person that they are Ethiopians, so that they may have appropriate documents to go back to Ethiopia? So is it a question of fund, or is it a question of documents and other legal issues?
It's a question of money.
So why the Ethiopian government doesn't give something? Because this is, his citizens, or the government to citizen. It's embarrassing worldwide. If I were the government, I don't want to be, pictured and painted this way. My citizens are in jail in a very dire situation, and then I see third parties like yourself, and again, diasporas, donating money while the government is just watching. It's really...
well, this is a situation that, is not for me to comment. I mean, many countries have difficulties in providing assistance to their nationals abroad under duress, either because their consular networks are limited or because they don't have the financial resources to do so. Ethiopia falls in this category. But there is more that can be done. We want to bring authorities of Malawi, authorities of Ethiopia, other international organizations, NGOs around the table to discuss this situation. It's not just a matter of humanitarian assistance, it's a matter that requires that in the future the migration flows to and from Malawi are managed in a way that doesn't expose Ethiopian migrants and other migrants to such vulnerabilities, because there's something wrong in the system. So this is, I think, where government authorities needs to intervene. Talk to their to the authorities in Malawi and see what can be arranged so that these situations do not repeat in the future. Because we need to create a system of a collaborative system where migration is not considered a crime, but is considered a legitimate aspiration. People might indeed not have the required documentation to pass through Malawi, but there are mechanisms that can be set in place so that the people do not fall, perhaps even prey of traffickers or smugglers. Yeah. You were making the example of Libya. How many Ethiopians and other nationalities, fully aware of the risks of transiting through Libya, do that, in the hope that they will have a safe network to do it, and that network eventually transforms itself into a situation of extreme exploitation, if not even kidnapping and ransom. That happens, unfortunately. It happens in many situations. Certainly we don't want that in the southern route we'll have the same level of suffering from migrants. We don't want that the process of return doesn't get into this sort of vulnerability and exploitation of migrants. We want to have a transparent processes where migrants are treated with dignity and respect.
Yeah. By the way, I understand that as a non-profit organization and third party trying to coordinate things between governments and also between non-profits, between funding organizations, you may not comment some political opinions. I understand that. So as Ethiopians, we give money, and also we want to pressurize the government in Ethiopia to do more. And you may not need to talk about those situations, but as far as my research, little research shows me that when I ask people why a government doesn't really care about its citizens, the feedback that I get is because the government acts like a colonizer, and there are political supporters that have opportunities in Ethiopia. There are Ethiopians who are from different ethnic groups who are not supporters of the government. So the government treats them as second citizens. So these are the second citizens that are migrating, that are exposed to this kind of dangerous situation. So when the government hears about this kind of situations, it doesn't have any sympathy or empathy, because these are people who are running away from its system, its dictatorial, brutal system. So the reaction of the government, that doesn't surprise many of Ethiopians that I have asked it. But we want to push the government further. Hey, consider humanitarian, have a humanitarian heart. These are people who are running away from lack of opportunities in Ethiopia, jobs, and because of persecutions. At least when they are in that situation, why don't you show humanitarian face and do something? Because we heard that they are not even giving documents for free. They are requesting, I think, people like you to pay them up to $800. I don't know. I'm not sure. The information may not be right. $500 or $800 to get document for these people to come to their country. That's really weird and very embarrassing for me. So do you have any information about government's request?
For sure, we will not pay that amount of money to a country that has the obligation to take back his own citizens, and I'm sure that this money is not being requested. What these figures that you mentioned is the figure that cost to IOM
to
repatriate them,
okay.
and includes, as I said, medical support, airfare back to Ethiopia, and then some help to reach final destination, some petty cash to reach the final transportation. That's what comes, between $500 to $600 per person. That's why we are working with our partner organization here in the U.S., USAIM, United States Association for International Migration, who is an NGO, is a not-for-profit organization whose contributions are tax deductible, to appeal to the private sector, for these and many other causes which require the engagement not only of state and official development assistance or humanitarian assistance, but also the goodwill of private sector, whether these are individuals, associations, or corporations, or foundations. So by visiting USAIM.org, there is a donate now box for this specific crisis, and we are seeking to raise $250,000 to help all the 400 Ethiopians currently.
How many dollars have you got so far, and from whom?
From the State Department, we have received a contribution.
How many? Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, we have assisted last month up to 100 Ethiopians, 100 Ethiopians, so at a cost of 500 to 600, we can give you an idea. Among them, there were many minors, which is also a reason of concern. About 1 person out of 10 in prison is in fact a child, so they should not be there. And as a priority, we will certainly look into the most vulnerable. And in a few weeks, in October, we'll be assisting another 40 Ethiopians to return home with funds available from the Department of State. But we are now appealing to the more general public, because, as I said, there are still 387 Ethiopians, so we need to match this gap and find the resources.
Yeah, the Global Alliance for Human Rights of Ethiopia, Gary, also, they requested Ethiopians to give further donations so that they may continue to donate towards your efforts. And I think other private, if you are watching and if you want to support, as Mr. Luca said, you may go to USAIM.org to donate, and also they are appealing to private foundations and other non-profit organizations, international, regional, and national organizations, to support towards their effort. It's very important and urgent. What kind of support are you looking for? Like, how many dollars do you need, or?
We're looking for $250,000. Okay. I know that in Malawi, the Ethiopian community is also mobilized, because as I said, when people eventually leave the prison, or while they are in prison, often them are undernourished, underfed, underdressed. So the Ethiopian community in Malawi has been doing a lot for these people. Has been providing food and clothes, and so it's an effort that has many different elements. But above all, we need to take people away from harm, and we need to put back the authorities of Malawi, Ethiopia, and others to find modalities so that this does become a recurrent issue. And a few months from now, we will be here again facing a humanitarian situation.
Now, how can you or maybe other stakeholders fix this problem for once and for all, on top of donating? Are there any factors that are contributing to aggravate the situation, so that you may suggest some policy suggestions? You mentioned earlier that the immigration law of Malawi is not right. What about United Nations, and also what about African Union and other regional organizations? They should intervene in terms of. So do you have any suggestions, like long-term suggestions, on how to tackle this kind of dire situation for migrants? I mean, they are already running away from their home, from their people. They are already psychologically and morally tarnished. Why another stress, another impact by putting them into jail? So do you have any policy suggestions, call for all stakeholders in terms of tackling this challenge?
Yeah, we need to work with the authorities in Southern Africa to find modalities through which migrants are not exposed to risk and are not exposed to smuggling or trafficking networks. This increases their vulnerability, puts them in debt, and then they found themselves, stranded on the road and then subjected to the kind of consequences that we are discussing. How to do that? Well, until a few years ago, perhaps all the countries really didn't have a policy, or if they had a policy, it was not a human rights-based policy. Now, if you look at some neighboring countries, Zambia, for instance, doesn't have a similar policy. They assist migrants more from a humanitarian point of view. There are alternatives to detentions. There are open centers. There are NGOs that can provide some humanitarian assistance, but not in a prison with criminals. There are a possibility to offer repatriation assistance through bringing them to the next, to the border of the countries from where they're coming from, with an agreement of the authorities of the other side to extend to them the same sort of assistance. And at the same time, there are also modalities to look into the labor migration needs of the country of destination, so that the people can use channels that are legal, that are appropriate for the kind of jobs that they are looking for. So there are many different ways of working to address this issue in a systemic way and bring them from a situation which leaves basically the migrants to his own device to a situation which provides some safety and guarantees. There are partners. There is a High Commissioner for Refugees, for those fleeing from persecution. There are regional organizations in SADC countries in Southern Africa, of course the African Union, and others that can play a useful role. But in the end, this is a domestic legislation, so it is the country that need to have their own legislation to figure.
Yeah, I asked that because you may have some relationship with influential partners, because yours is providing social, maybe cultural, whatever support you give in terms of finance and so on to migrants, but other regional powers and continental powers, they have the policy-making authority, prerogative authority to make some laws, modalities, frameworks, and so on to prevent that. Let's talk about generic discussion.
Yeah, freedom of movement. I mean, if you look at the situation, for instance, in Central America, if you are from within the Central American countries, you have a possibility to migrate freely between
in Europe too.
The country within the European country.
Yeah, Africa has to go to the next level. It's very sad that the continent in the 21st century, they are led by leaders who are not really adapting to the 21st century mindset and framework and what's going on around the world. That's very beneficiary to each country if they create that borderless kind of movement of people. I don't mean that people should migrate without following the legal procedures, but I'm talking about creating a wider market, a wider network of interactions and integrations within the continent. I would like to talk to you about how to stop, if possible, or mitigate migration as a whole. I mean, it's very challenging. Do you have any picture, do you have any vision in terms of how can we stop? Of course, when I talk to Ethiopians, how can we stop this, migration of Ethiopians to different places? Some of them are very risky, and they tell me that, hey, we don't need to migrate. People should not migrate. They should stay at home. It's better to die there. Even if they have some persecution, it's better for them to go to the jungle, fight and die there than go to Libya and get slaughtered, or go to Malawi and go to prison. But I find that's challenging because some people, they prefer to migrate. So yes, many people think that it's better to stay at home and fight, and it's better to die there than go out somewhere else. But we need to find kind of acceptable to migrants too. Migrants, they may not want that kind of risk. They want to try their luck, go out and see. Do you have any suggestion to countries, to individuals who may aspire to migrate in terms of how can we stop migration?
Well, you're asking a very challenging question.
I know, yeah.
But let's put it this way. Our philosophy in this is that migration is not, something to be considered with negative lenses. Migration should be an act of free will, should not be an act of compulsion. You should have the freedom to decide to migrate. You shouldn't be pushed to migrate because of lack of basic human rights standards. But the people should use, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights recognize the right of people to move. It's an inherent human right to move, and I think, as I said, human mobility is part of human nature. But it has to happen within, a process that guarantees the safety and the protection of the migrants, and not expose the migrants to vulnerabilities. So our effort as an international organization is to reduce the risks and enhance the opportunities, reduce the possibility to be exploited, of becoming vulnerable in the process, and enhance the positive aspect of migration, which are positive for the individuals that migrate because they would have new opportunities, are positive for the countries of immigration, and this has to be recognized. The migrants bring labor, they bring their knowledge, their capacity, their skills, their resources, their enthusiasm, often their youth, and it's good for the countries of out-migration, which receives remittances from abroad, and remittances have become more important than development assistance. So it is a process that needs to be put in a win-win situation rather than left to a situation where so many people are being exploited and risk their lives in the process. It's very sad what is happening in the Mediterranean now. 3,000 people have died since the beginning of the year trying to reach the shores of Italy and of Greece. It is painful that this happens in an area which certainly has the capacities, the resources to control this phenomenon and to assist the people in need. But this is the reality. So it is a very, very critical issue that is going on at the moment in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Western Balkan, but we cannot focus only our attention on that particular crisis and forget many other spots in the world where migration still happens under situations that are not at all optimal.
By the way, I didn't see the angle that you showed me, which is you appreciate even the phenomena of migration because it benefits. It's possible to create win-win scenarios for both migrants and also the hosting countries. I see that light now. My question maybe is, do you invest on awareness, modalities? Do you implement some kind of preventive measures in terms of, I know you, for example, in the case of migrants in Malawi, you're trying to overcome the challenge and try to solve it, to fix it, but do you also have some programs that you use to raise awareness, to promote the kind of migration formula or model that you're talking about? What kind of things are you doing?
Very much so. I mean, a few years back, there was a lot of investment in information programs, and most of these information programs were basically telling potential migrants, do not migrate. And eventually we sort of evaluated this program and said, look, these programs don't work.
Not realistic.
People may be aware that by going through certain areas, they expose themselves to risk. They may be aware that crossing a desert, you might die of thirst. You may be aware that you might be subjected to exploitation. You may be aware that we become very vulnerable. But if people have a compelling reason to go, they will say, yes, I know the risks, and I go. It's not by telling you might be at risk that you will not, it's a difficult decision to migrate, but once people have made the decisions, and they also know, I mean, they know from their fellow that are,
they have already
reached. They say, look, be careful of this, be careful of that. So we change strategy. We say, look, if you want to inform the people, you have to give them alternatives.
Yeah.
You have to say, listen, this is not a path, but following this modality, you will have maybe a chance to apply to that particular country, or the opportunities to go and work in that particular area under a regime of guarantees. If you want to apply for family reunification, these are the modalities to follow. And working with the government of the receiving countries to accept that IOM runs information centers which offer the people a real opportunity, not just warning, but an opportunity to follow certain channels. This is difficult. Obviously, there are more, if you like, would-be migrants than mechanisms. But our effort as an international organization for migration is to open up legal migration opportunities. so that more and more people can have a safe way of migrating for various purposes. And sometimes many people do not necessarily want to migrate for life. They want to migrate for educational experience. They want to migrate for increasing their capital, and then maybe reinvesting if there are the possibilities to reinvest in the country of origin. Or they want to migrate for family reunification. So there are many different reasons. We need to look into the specificity of these reasons and create programs that allow people to use those opportunities.
So you have these informations on your website?
Well, website or
your centers around the world,
depending on the various countries. Each country has its own particular situation. So
shall we talk about migrants, Ethiopian migrants in Yemen, because there are Ethiopian migrants in Yemen stranded there. Do you have any latest information about them?
Yes, I need to check the numbers, but because of the conflict in Yemen, the breakdown of communication, the breakdown of transport infrastructure, the closing of the airports, the ports, some of them have been damaged, others are under siege, others are under embargo. So many Ethiopians and other nationalities have remained stranded. We have received requests for thousands of so-called third country nationals, we call it in IOM jargon, basically citizens that are in Yemen but are not Yemenitis, to be evacuated. Because they're under threat, because they have no longer a job, because they are often living in a very precarious situations in a country that is going through open warfare. So people are at risk of their lives and they want to be evacuated. We've tried to evacuate many of these from air bridges. It has been very difficult. The airport in Sana'a has been closed on and off, and this is the only airport. There's been a number of conditions also very difficult to implement. So we're also now moving into evacuation by sea, and many boats have left for chartered by IOM with thousands of migrants. So we have among them many Ethiopians have left. I don't have the numbers, but we are in the hundreds. We know that there are pockets of Ethiopians still in Yemen in difficult situations, and because of poor communications, we need to see how we can reach to them and offer them some return facilities if they want to. So there are also Ethiopians that are in these facilities that have been perhaps injured by the war, and therefore they need medical attention before they can be moved. So we want to look into this situation.
Do you have any last-minute appeal to individuals, foundations, and stakeholders? You want to talk to them, tell them what you're looking for, how can they become helpful to what you do, and so on?
Well, the diaspora associations are enormous resources for the countries of origin, for the people of the countries of origin, and particularly those associations that are based in countries as relevant as the US or European countries, to make their voice heard with Congress, so that funds are allocated to meet the needs of their citizens abroad, but also to work with the generous number of private sector interlocutors that can be mobilized and come in joint private-public partnerships. So as IOM and IOM through USAIM, we can really channel these resources the most direct way to assist the most vulnerable persons in need. I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for coming here, sharing your information and what you have been doing to help our fellow Ethiopians in Malawi, Yemen, and other parts of the world. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate what you do to help out our migrants. Thank you. Dear our viewers, as you have watched, we have been talking about how Ethiopians migrants in Malawi are in a very precarious situation, and what IOM has been doing, and also we talked about some of the support they need. Already the Global Alliance, Gary, has given $10,000 to IOM to support what they do to repatriate Ethiopians from Malawi. If you are watching this program and if you feel like you want to support, go to USM them, and also go to Gary Global Alliance and support financially and also materially. Do whatever you could to help your fellow Ethiopians who are in a very precarious situation. Thank you for watching and also supporting your fellow Ethiopians around the world who are fleeing from their country because of economic situations and political persecutions. Thank you very much for watching.